Kuliah Roro ST, and also Chairman of Indonesia Chamber of Commerce, Bapak Arsyad Rashid. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good evening, distinguished guests, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the third and fourth talk show of the Y20 Indonesian Summit 2022, From Recovery to Resilience, Rebuilding the Youth Agenda Beyond COVID-19. Please give warm applause to all of us here tonight. Thank you very much. Let me introduce you. My name is Tiffany Citra Raitama, and on behalf of Y20 and the organizing committee, allow me to convey our sincere gratitude to all of you who have attended today's event on site and virtually. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, in an effort to reduce the use of plastic bottles and to support sustainable development, we are pleased to inform you that we have provided a couple of water refill stations at the venue, so please feel free to refill your tumbler that you have brought with you at your convenience. Before we begin, we would like to extend our warmest welcome to our distinguished guests. Good evening, Member of Parliament Commission 7, Ibu Diah Roro SP. Selamat malam, Ibu. Thank you for coming. And also, Vice Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Angela Tanun Sudibyo. Chairman of Indonesia Chamber of Commerce, Bapak Arsyad Rashid. Selamat malam, Bapak. Thank you for coming. Please give warm applause. And also we have educator and founder of Sekolahmu, Ibu Najila Shihab, all of co-chairs of Y20 Indonesia 2022, all delegates and observers of Y20 Indonesia 2022. Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, we had an amazing opportunity to talk about youth employment on the previous talk show, on the first talk show, moderated by John Dominguez, USA delegate to Y20 Indonesia 2022. And speaking about digital transformation, on the second talk show, moderated by Neil Swanepoel, South African delegate to Y20 Indonesian 2022. Very fruitful discussion, right? Okay, it has given us fruitful discussion and also delightful insight about the last issues, our previous main issues raised in Y20 Summit. And now, today, we will further listen some insights, more insights, gain more information and also discussions that will be just engaging as the previous talk shows. Ladies and gentlemen, on this third talk show, the speakers are going to converse on the topic about sustainable and livable planet. But before that, let me introduce you to our moderator for the third talk show. She is the Senior Climate Policy Analyst at the United Nations Supporter Principles for Responsible Investment, where she advises policymakers and investors on the regulation and actions needed to finance. And also, she holds a BA with high honors in international development from Kenyon College. And she also received an MPhil in Development Studies from the University of Cambridge, where she served as the co-president of the Cambridge Society for Social and Economic Development. So please welcome, let me invite to the stage the one and only our moderator for the third talk show, Ibu Jody and Chu Xuan Wang, Canadian delegate to Y20 Indonesia 2022. Please give Ibu Jody a very warm welcome. The stage is yours, Ibu Jody.
Thank you so much, Ms. Tiffany. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone joining us today online and in person. My name is Jody Ann Wong, and I am the Canadian delegate for the Sustainable and Livable Planet track for Y20 2022. I am from White Rock, Canada, located on the traditional unceded territories of the Sami-Amis Nation, the broader territory of the English people. And I am very honored to be your moderator for today's panel entitled Ensuring a Sustainable and Livable Planet for Our Common Future. Of course, before we start, I really want to give my utmost gratitude to the organizing committee for today's talk show and for bringing us all to Jakarta after 5 long months. So thank you so much. We are living at a critical turning point in history. The world is currently facing the global health, the global security, and the environmental crisis of our generation. And the situation, let's be honest, is worsening. Over the past week, we have witnessed record-breaking heat waves across the world, which offers a glimpse into our future. And young people in particular are disproportionately affected by the intersections of these crises. Youth are the present and future inhabitants of our planet, but the state of our world today depends on the decisions of all leaders and all policymakers, the decisions that they make today. So the actions that we take or our inactions in this decade will determine the prosperity or the collapse of our existence on Earth. The urgent need to transform the way society that we live in interact through nature is very important, and that urgency prevails. And the tangible impact of a planetary crisis is escalating today in frequency and in scope. So that brings us all here today. The goal of this panel today is to discuss how the global leadership can help shape a sustainable and livable planet and livable future for youth, for our current generation, and for our future generation. And with that, I now want to introduce our distinguished speakers for today's panel. First, I am delighted to welcome to the stage the Honorable Ms. Dia Roro Esti. Ms. Dia currently serves as a Member of Parliament in Indonesia, representing the district of Gresik and Lamongan of East Java. She currently sits in Commission 7, which deals extensively with energy, research, innovation, and industry sector. She is also serving as the Secretary of the Green Economy Caucus at the Indonesian Parliament. Thank you so much for joining us today, Ms. Esti. Please welcome to the stage. I'm really looking forward to having a wonderful conversation with you. Next, I want to welcome to the stage Mr. Arshad Rashid. Mr. Arshad is now the chairman of the Indonesian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, as well as the president director of Energy, Indonesia's leading integrated energy firm. Please come to the stage, Mr. Arshad. Next, I want to introduce our first virtual speaker of the evening, Dr. Marie Elka Pangetsu. She is the World Bank's Managing Director of Development Policy and Partnerships. Dr. Marie oversees the institution's global practice groups and external and corporate relations function. She has over 30 years of experience across various sectors in government, international organizations, and academia. She has served as Indonesia's Minister of Trade from 2004 to 2011, and as Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy from 2011 to 2014. I'm not sure if you can see her on stage, but thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Marie. We're very honored by your presence. And last, but certainly not least, I am pleased to also introduce the Right Honorable Mr. Alak Sharma, who served as the president for COP26, the 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference under the UK presidency. Previously, he also served as the UK Secretary of State for Business, Energy, Industrial Strategy, otherwise known as BEIS, and Minister of State for Employment at the Department of Work and Pensions, as well as the Minister of State for Housing and Planning prior to that. Welcome, sir. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Before we go into the panel, I know the OC had a request because Mr. Sharma has to leave us before the panel closes. So if I could just ask Mr. Arshad and Ms. Esti to come to the front and we'll take a photo now that good? Good. Great. Thank you so much. All right. So we've got a stellar panel today representing everything from industry, policy, to international organization, and multilateral forums. And we're gathered here again to discuss our common future, the future of a sustainable and livable planet for current and future generations. There's certainly no time to waste, so let's just get right into it. I want to first start talking about policy. As the youth delegates sitting down here today have spent countless hours over the last 5 months negotiating and collaborating on key policy proposals, which will eventually become a communique in the next week. So I want to give my first questions to Mr. Alak Sharma. At COP26, heard the call to action from civil society, from government, the finance sector, amongst many others, to keep 1.5 on the table. And we saw commitments made from Glasgow that gave us a fragile win. The world has changed so significantly since last November with the escalating global energy security crisis. We're seeing countries, particularly in Europe, retreating back to coal. We're seeing countries' recovery spending from COVID not necessarily aligned or often at odds with their climate commitments. So at this critical juncture, Mr. Sharma, my question for you is, what should policymakers do to ensure that environmental objectives and climate policies do not take a backseat to other needs and priorities? Sorry, Mr. Sharma, I think you're muted right now. The tech team please support on this.
Yes, thank you so much for that. I have some sort of written words, but I think let me dispense with that and just speak to you directly from the heart on this issue. I think what we did in Glasgow was actually historic in bringing together almost 200 countries to forge the Glasgow Climate Pact. And if you remember, even at that time, we were in a position where the geopolitics was becoming more challenging, and yet, I think because countries recognized that it was in their self-interest, it was in our collective interest to deal with climate change, we managed to get this historic agreement over the line. And just to remind you what was in this, every country pledged to look again at their 2030 emission reduction target and revert to that by the end of this year to ensure that it was aligned with the Paris temperature goal. We made progress on more finance, particularly adaptation finance for developing nations. We made progress on issues relating to loss and damage, on work to empower youth. And of course, we also had some big commitments from the private sector. This was one of the first COPs where we had significant private sector presence, and we had over 5,000 international companies which signed up to the UN's Race to Zero campaign. And that number, by the way, has grown to 7,500 now and continues to grow as well, as more and more businesses come on board, recognize why it is in our collective futures to pursue a net zero future. We also had $130 trillion worth of private sector money, which pledged to net zero by 2050. And I think we were able to say with some credibility, if you looked at all the commitments that had come together, that we had kept the prospect of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial levels alive. But of course, that was based on every country coming forward and delivering on their commitments. And of course, one of the other things that we did manage to do, working with partners around the world, is to ensure that when we took on the mantle of organizing COP26, less than 30% of the global economy was covered by a net zero target. We're now at over 90%. And if you look at what the IEA, the respected journal Nature, others have said, is that if all the commitments that we have made are actually delivered, we will be heading to below 2 degrees of global warming. Clearly, that isn't good enough, and we need to be doing even more. But most importantly, we need to deliver on the commitments that we all made. Now, I think you made a very important point, which is that the world has changed since Glasgow. We have seen the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Vladimir Putin's forces, and you've seen the resultant reverberations around the world. Yes, we have seen the return of war in Europe. You've seen the impact of energy security being a big challenge for many countries, food security issues, inflation, of course, rising across the world, as indeed our debt levels amongst governments. And of course, every world leader has to deal with these immediate priorities. That is what you need to do as a prime minister, a president, as ministers in any government, is to make sure that you're dealing and addressing those immediate issues that matter to your populations. But of course, what we also know, because the science is telling us this very, very clearly, is that the chronic threat of climate change remains with us. And in fact, it is getting worse. You've seen the reports from the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. We've seen around the world with our own eyes right now what is going on as a result of global warming. I'm sitting here in London speaking to you. The UK is experiencing its hottest day on record, the hottest day on record here in the UK. You're seeing across Europe, it's blazing. We've got wildfires, forest fires running in countries like Portugal. You've seen in closer to you, in India and Pakistan, you have seen in recent weeks heat waves with, again, record temperatures. I've just returned from South Africa, where flooding has led very sadly to the loss of hundreds of lives in KwaZulu-Natal province. And what this tells us, if we didn't already know, is that climate change does not respect borders. And in fact, the window of time we have left to act is indeed closing. Having said that, I think we are seeing some reactions to what is going on in Ukraine with the war there. Lots of countries have understood that if you want to ensure that you have energy security, you cannot rely on fossil fuels controlled by a hostile actor. And so what you are seeing is for very, very many countries setting out their plans to accelerate the push on clean energy, on renewables. Here in the UK, we're not reliant on Russian hydrocarbons, but nevertheless, we've set out our own British energy security strategy to make sure that we are going to be building 5 times as much offshore wind, 5 times as much solar as we have right now by 2030, a big push on nuclear, on hydrogen. And the aim is that by 2035, we will have fully decarbonized our electricity system. That is a move that you are seeing across the world as well. And all of us, every country has a role to play here. As I said, by the time we get to the end of this year, we want to see every country come forward with revised 2030 emission reduction targets. We've already had 16 that have come through since COP26. I know, having taken part in international meetings, most recently the Major Economies Forum, which was organized by President Biden, that there are other big economies that will come forward and ensure that we are seeing these commitments come through. So what we need is to quicken the pace in these remaining 4 months to COP26. And actually, one of the areas where we can really make a big difference is to work together through the various multilateral forums that we have. Last year, the UK, of course, took on the COP presidency, but we also had the presidency of the G7. Italy, our partners at COP26, were also the holders of the presidency of the G20. And we were able to work across the G7, across the G20, the UN General Assembly, and then obviously pre-COP and COP itself to deliver on climate commitments. And it is the same thing that we want to see happen this year. We have already made some progress through the G7. We have made progress through the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting that was held in Rwanda a few weeks ago. And of course, our colleagues and friends in Indonesia, you are hosting and chairing and presiding over G20. And there is a real opportunity as part of that discussion to make sure that we're pushing forward on all the climate commitments that we have made. So the final thing I want to say to you is that, yes, we have seen some progress since COP26. Yes, the world has changed, but that should not lessen our resolve to deal with this critical issue. And looking in the audience today, I can see the vast majority are young people. And at the end of the day, the future belongs to your generation. And what you need to be saying to world leaders is that they need to deliver on the promises that they made at COP26. You know, we had 120 world leaders who came together, made very impassioned speeches about the need to tackle climate change. Well, young people in your country, young people across the world, civil society across the globe will be watching at Sharm el-Sheikh in COP27 to see whether world leaders are indeed delivering on the promises that they made. The final thing I want to say to you is the one thing that I have learned through this process of chairing a COP and working with countries and partners around the world, and of course I pay tribute to our friends in Indonesia, to Minister Siti, Minister Luhut, and indeed others, Minister Arifin, others that I've had an opportunity to work with. I pay tribute to the work that they're doing domestically and the work that they're doing to drive this agenda through the G20. But the one thing I have learned is trust is a really vital commodity in climate negotiations. And we have to make sure that we maintain the trust and the hope that we had coming out of Glasgow. We need to work together to ensure that we are continuing to be able to say that we have kept 1.5 alive. It matters for me, it matters for my children, it matters for you, and it matters for future generations as well. So let's make sure that we hold our leaders to account, and that when we gather in Sharm el-Sheikh in less than 4 months from now, we are able to say that we have made progress, we are building a better, greener world, and that at the end of the day, we are reaping an environmental and economic dividend because of the green jobs and the new industries that we are creating across the world. Thank you. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Sharma. Thank you so much for taking us through the progress that's been made since COP26 and the work that still needs to be done, and perhaps as the current moment is a call to action for youth, but as we see the worsening natural disasters happening worldwide. And perhaps it's also a call to action for all of us to hold leaders accountable, so we don't just look from one COP to the next for commitments, but that actions take place throughout the year, month to month, on a daily basis. Thank you again for that. I now want to go to Ms. Esti really quickly. For my second question, I just want to give a credit to our Russian delegate, SLP Vadim, for proposing this question. Indonesia is one of Asia's key developing economies, which has achieved remarkable progress, but economic growth doesn't come for granted. Since 1990, the country's carbon emissions have increased by over 300% and is continuing to rise. And at this moment, amidst the energy security crisis, the world is still increasing its demand for fossil fuels, particularly coal. That demand is rising, and we've yet to see the peak. So could you please tell us more about how you see the mid to long-term decarbonization path and transition plan for Indonesia within the current context?
So thank you so much for that very, very important question, and of course for having me here today at the Y20 Summit. So firstly, I'd like to kind of highlight that Indonesia has ratified the Paris Agreement through law number 16 year 2016. So this was ratified before I was in parliament. At the time, Mbak Sarah was in parliament. And so during her time, this law was actually ratified in the Indonesian parliament. And our goal, our target is to achieve a decrease in greenhouse gas emissions by 29% and 41% with international aid, taking into account that there are multiple sectors that play a role in the levels of emissions in Indonesia. And particularly when we speak of the energy sector, why do I speak of the energy? Not only was it asked through the question, but also because I'm a member of Commission 7. So Commission 7 deals extensively with the energy, industry, and research and innovation sectors. And so within the energy sector itself, this contributes around 30% of our total emissions. And we also have a target within the energy sector, for example, through the national energy policy of achieving 23% renewables by 2025. However, right now, we are still in roughly 11.5% of renewables of the total energy, of total energy source, and 38% itself coming from coal, and 31.2% from petroleum, 19.3% from natural gas, and like I said, 11.5% from renewables. So one of our challenges right now is how can we transition within the energy sector? So this is really important because, I mean, as everyone here knows, especially in the G20, one of the pillars of discussion is actually energy transition. And I think this is so important for us to focus on because it's not as easy as we think it is, right? We have to collaborate across sectors. So this is not only the work of the parliamentarians, but also business, entrepreneurs, also, the youth members such as yourselves, academia, academics, as well as the private and public sectors. Everyone plays a very significant role in ensuring that Indonesia can transition in the best way possible. However, because, coal, for example, and fossil fuel is still predominantly the prominent source of energy, I think it's also important to highlight that number one of our challenges that we are facing in Indonesia is in terms of the price. So when we speak of the price, coal and the fossil fuel sector is a lot more cheaper in comparison to renewable energy. And so this is one of the main drawbacks. And so what we're doing in Parliament is we are pushing a bill on renewable energy. It's called the New and Renewable Energy Bill. We hope that we can ratify this year. That is the goal. We want to make sure that we get this done just in time for the G20 starting in November. And so that's one of our main goals. And why is this important? We want to make sure that we make room for investment to grow within the renewable energy sector. We want to make sure that the negative externalities associated to the fossil fuel industry is being accounted for. I think right now in the Ministry of Finance, they're discussing with regards to carbon pricing. So the carbon taxing system, which was meant to be enacted in April. However, we are experiencing some drawbacks, but this does not mean that this will not happen. So this is something that we're pushing through the Parliament as well in ensuring that something like that takes place. This is, again, stressing on the negative externalities associated to the fossil fuel industry. But all in all, I think the commitment of multiple sectors is so important, especially, for example, the state-owned enterprise for electricity. PLN plays a very significant and vital role in this, the Ministry of Energy as well. So having commitment from all parties is very, very vital. The Minister of Energy, Pa Arifin, we've discussed in a couple of working meetings with him, has mentioned the phasing out of coal by 2060. And this is very much in line with the net zero emissions target in 2060. So there are targets such as that, but I do have to admit, realistically, what I see on the ground, what I see on the societal level, because as a parliamentarian, we're very much exposed to how communities are, reacting to such laws, or such targets. The most important thing for the Indonesian society is that energy is accessible and that it is cheap. Unfortunately, when we speak of, energy sources that are environmentally friendly, this is not as accessible and is not cheap. So this is the reality that we're currently dealing with. Maybe this is open to debate, but another observation that I've made is that, climate change is a problem that is noticed by those falling under the middle and upper income class citizens. Because when I do speak to those who are of the low income category, all they care about is that the electricity is, it's turning on. They have access to energy and that they can carry out their daily activities. So productivity is still being met. They don't really care about the source, right? They don't care if the electricity comes from the sun. They don't care if the electricity comes from the wind. All they care about is that their light is turned on. So this is, I think, our homework as policymakers to ensure that the right policies are set in place so then we can achieve the 23% target. We can achieve the net zero emissions target by 2060. And so I hope that this is not only a target, right? This is not something that we discuss, but it's something that we can realize. And we need the commitment from all sectors. The parliamentarians can't work alone on this.
Thank you so much for that. The last great point you said on targets alone will not do it, and we need to see an actionable plan from the whole of the economy. You touched on carbon pricing, which is something that the Y20 delegates are actively discussing within our finance working group. You also mentioned just transition to ensure security, energy security and energy access. Before I go to Mr. Arshad, really quickly, as you mentioned the targets of Indonesia, and let me just repeat that, that's net zero by 2060, 29% below business as usual scenario by 2030, or 40% reduction contingent on sufficient international finance. Could you share a bit about how we got to that number? Do you feel that it's sufficient? And if not, what do we need to do more, and what would it take to increase that target and to ensure Paris alignment consistently?
Realistically, when we look at that number, it is a target which can be higher. Actually, we have the potential of having a higher target, but realistically on the ground, we are working very hard actually already in terms of realizing that target. So whether it be in the land use change and forestry sector, we're talking about how we can decrease, deforestation, slash and burn, forest fires. This is also very much contributing to the level of emissions in our atmosphere. But apart from that, again, within the energy sector, it's also like I said, it's not as easy as we believe it can be. But I do want to highlight that it's so important for us to change the narrative around how we have to act on climate change and how we have to move forward. Because when we see, for example, energy transition or changing our lifestyles as a barrier, then we will never see it as a positive thing. But when we see it as an opportunity for growth, for us to create a sustainable future for all, and we're not only talking about the economy, but we're talking about how the Indonesian citizens or citizens around the world can be prosperous, but also without leaving behind the environmental aspects. Because without a safe and sound environment, how are we supposed to reach all of our targets? I mean, we have the target of being, the golden age for Indonesia is in 2045, maximizing on our demographic dividend. And so if we don't take into account the environment aspect, then how are we supposed to reach 2045 in the safest manner? So I'm also the commissioner of the Low Carbon Development Indonesia under Bappenas, actually. And we've highlighted that there are actual substantial changes that can be made. And actually, based on the research, we can actually achieve more of a reduction than the 29% that's been set. And also, the green sector has the potential of creating, I think, more than 15 million jobs around the country. And so when we see this as an opportunity of growth, our mindset changes. And that change of mindset needs to be happening throughout all the different sectors.
Thank you for that. Since you brought up the energy sector earlier, and particularly on fossil fuels, I want to discuss that for a moment, as of course it's the elephant in the room. We have to touch on it. And you mentioned that we know the transformation to net zero entails a whole of society, whole of economy, whole of finance shift. Every person, every sector needs to play a part. And within that, the decarbonization of specific sectors, particularly sectors that are important for us to electrify the economy, is very critical. So I want to bring Mr. Arshad in here. As we know, last year, Indica pledged to cut its profit from coal by 50% and to diversify into other sectors, including renewable energy. And subsequently, the commitment of net zero by 2050 was also made. So my question is, why this commitment? what prompted Indika to make this commitment, and why is phasing out for coal companies so important to ensure net zero?
That's. First of all, I would like to just thank you, Jody, for the question, and I would like to greet Ibu Marie, my senior mentor, Ibu Marie, and of course, Esti, and everyone here. First of all, I'm actually very proud to be here because perhaps I'm one of the oldest here sitting down, and so, but basically, when we talk about the commitment itself, first of all, if you don't mind, I'd like to say one story. Right? It's actually about one day, a few years ago, 5 years ago. I was sitting down having coffee, and I was having a coffee with my daughter. She was schooling in London, and she came back. And so after lunch, we have coffee, and suddenly she handed over her handphone to me. And then I was just looking at it, I was trying to look, right? And I was just looking at killers, and they say killers there. And then I give it back to her and say, no, Dad, please open that. So I opened that. It says Killers of the World. And my name was there. You know what? Because we are doing the business of fossil fuel. And that actually, that lunch, I will never forget, because that changed my life. After that, I went back to the office. Actually, it was within the weekend, it was Monday, and I asked our board of directors and says, guys, there is something on here. And then I was telling the story about my daughter. I think we need to change. And that is actually the first conversation I had. We start talking about what should we do with the energy. And so that's the first part. Right? So where then I say to them, let's do something. What can we do? But what is very important, what actually is about, if you want to look at this, you have to look at it from the business perspective. We have to look at it from, is it loud enough? I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Is it much better? Sorry. So I was mumbling then just now. I'm sorry. So I was telling a story to myself, and I apologize about that. So okay, but I hope you have the story about my daughter, what changed my life, right? Okay, so at least that. All right. So after that, then that's what the discussion start, right? And our business, if you look at our business, maybe it's like this business. What is coal, fossil fuel. But this is the thing. We look at what is there and we say, I think we need to change. And so what we did was we start discussing about a new strategy moving forward. And when we look at what will be Indika Energy futures in the next 5, 10, and 20 years, and that's when we start to say, okay, what should we do? And we actually change our strategy. So when we talk about Indika Energy, the energy stands for just energy. Now the energy stands for energizing Indonesia. When it says energizing Indonesia, then we start, okay, one of the portfolio we have is energy. So we are trying to move away from coal, and we make the commitment. But again, the reality is it's not as easy as flipping. Why? It takes a lot of money to actually do it. And this is real. So this is what we have to do. Then we start talking to our financials. We talk to our investors. We have bonds investors, and they say, guys, we want to change. Can we do what we call a transition bond? Because at the end of the day, this is what we need. So again, we see that the future we have to look away. And the necessity is not only from one is actually our value system. So we put in ESG as part of our value system. environment, social, and governance. And that's first and foremost that we do. Because I do believe in this. You know, we can say about vision and mission, but if a company does not have values, forget about it. And so that's why we say we need to have a value of ESG instilled within us, in the organization, because entity is made of people. And what we have to do and make sure it's not about just saying let's have a commitment, a net zero 2050. It's not that. But the point is how to change the mindset, but more the values. So because once we instill the values into the organization, then the commitment will be there. So let's not just make a commitment, but make sure it is instilling values. So that's how we start, right? So now you say the why, my personal why and why. But again, the world changed, which now I sometimes ask myself, right? You know, we all forgot about 3 years ago when we actually hit the COVID-19. One say it's COVID, but I say this is when God is angry. Slap our face and say, hey, all humans in all religions, black, white, yellow, what, brown, whatever, from all over the world, we are reminded that the earth is born. We are reminded that for a moment, we can see suddenly the air become so clean. Suddenly you see the water so clean. You see a different world because less mobility and suddenly. So it's a reminder. But then, as human, after then you say, oh, pandemic is over, hallelujah. Suddenly, it's like going out of a prison, you know? Wow, euphoria. And we all forget that moment. So I wanted to touch on more about the values, because I think that's where key is. Make sure that when we talk about this sustainability, when we talk about this, we can talk and we can change, we can do energy transition, whatever it is. First thing first is the mindset and the values. So it is important, I think, for you guys as young generation, to start this in education. That's mean what? To start in the level of kindergarten, in the level of primary school, to put in the mind, the set of mind, that this is the way to do it. This is where sustainability is. Because whatever money we spend, if we don't spend on our value systems, starting from the children, human will not change. So that's what I want to touch on first.
Thank you. Thank you for that. And yes, round of applause. Thank you for sharing kind of the candid personal moment that made the switch for you as well as the broader picture. And great point on education. Perhaps now it's the call to the education working group of the G20 to read the Y20 communique this year and understand that without education at all levels, for all people on sustainability, we cannot shift the vision, we cannot shift the values, we cannot shift the narratives, and we cannot have action. Thank you. Now I want to go to Dr. Marie. Thank you so much for joining us today. Mr. Arshad also earlier touched on the need for finance. The transition is expensive, but the cost of inaction is even greater. And today we have seen a plethora of commitments from big banks globally to quit fossil fuel, especially coal. Yet the reality remains that despite these pledges, the world's top banks are still pumping money into fossil fuels in 2021 at the figure of 742 billion US dollars. So in your opinion, what is prompting the shift in capital reallocation away from fossil fuels? But at the same time, what is the reason in the delay in progress that we're seeing today? And how can we propel the entire economy to accelerate this transition?
Thank you, Jody, and good day to everyone, to Pak Arshad, by ST and all the youth delegation at Y20. Before I answer your question, because financing is one part of the answer to what we're all talking about, but it's not, financing comes with a framework of what are we financing. So I wanted to sort of draw on what everybody else has been saying before we talked about the financing. But let me just appreciate, first of all, the role of youth. And all of you in Y20, because really you are the future, and so you are the ones that can really make a difference, whether it's reminding everybody for the call of action and delivering on the call of action, and to also yourselves do the action, including entering to politics like by ST, to really make sure that the leadership delivers on the promises. Second point I wanted to make was everybody mentioned the urgency of climate change. And I think we don't need to be reminded. We are already living the effects of the climate change. Indonesia is not an exception, having experienced a lot of extreme weather disasters and so on. But I just wanted to emphasize, besides the urgency of the climate change, the interlinkages between planet, people, and the economy are becoming much, much more interlinked as ever. COVID, the pandemic, is a reminder of that. The drivers of food insecurity is climate related, and so on. So they are very interrelated. So if you don't have an integrated approach to the interrelated problems of this crisis, you will not also be able to address the crisis. The third point I wanted to make, following up on Alak Sharma's point, I think Glasgow was a turning point in the sense that he said 90% of countries made their commitments to net zero, including Indonesia, including countries like India, and many other developing countries made a commitment to net zero, and companies and financial institutions also made commitments to net zero, and lots of pledges about helping countries to be able to meet their commitments. But as many of you, including ST, said, it's not about targets and pledges, it's about implementation. So this is the crux of the matter, and financing is part of implementation. So when we talk about implementation, when countries make a pledge or a target of 2060, like Indonesia for net zero, and NDC targets of 29% and 41% with support, it has to be underlined by a framework or a strategy for a low carbon development pathway. And ST mentioned the Low Carbon Development Initiative of Indonesia. That's an example of how countries need to frame their long-term low carbon strategy, because financing needs to come in to something which is predictable and has a pathway, long-term pathway, because investing, which is what it is about, investing in sustainable infrastructure that will lead you to a low carbon development path takes a lot of funding, but it also takes the policy framework, the regulations that need to be in place to attract whether it's development funding or whether it's private sector funding, right? So it is to the crux of the matter that I think several of you have already mentioned. The government, it has to be country-led, it's country-specific, and people are using the term country platforms. What's the country platform for a long-term low-carbon development strategy? And that's the kind of the what. And in terms of the what, this is where multilateral development banks and regional development banks come in to help countries develop this country platform, which has to be whole of government, whole of economy, and whole of society. I think Dia mentioned it needs to be multi-sectoral. That's really crucial. It has to be multi-sectoral because it's whole of economy. It has to take into account just transition. It has to be affordable for the people and so on. So how do you develop that long-term low-carbon development strategy? Prioritize the sectors that need to have the action for climate action, whether it's energy, whether it's adaptation, whether it's food and land use or forestry, or the oceans. It depends on the country, which are the priorities that are imperative. And then from the priorities, you develop the investment that's needed. And this is where, let me come to the financing question now. You talk about the need for, you need to have investments, transformative investments in systems, energy, transportation, infrastructure, food and land use and agriculture and manufacturing. You need investments, you need massive investments. The estimate is like anything between 1 to 4 trillion per year for developing countries to do this. For Indonesia, I think Sri Mulyani has come up with an estimate, if I'm not mistaken, around 300 billion, and this for the next decade or so. And so you come up with estimates. I need the financing. There's the 100 billion pledge from developed countries and multilateral development banks, but certainly that's not enough. You need private sector, and this is where the financing has to come in, both from the public as well as the finance from the private sector. We just came out of meetings in G20 and B20 to discuss this. Pa Arshad was there also, and I think the conclusion is that you do need the clear direction of the government, the policies that underpin whether it's the energy transition, whether it's food and land use, and what are the policies that are there. Actually, Mbak Dia mentioned a few in the case of Indonesia, the Renewable Energy Bill, the renewable energy pricing, for instance, because you want to transition, but you also want to accelerate renewable energy. The key here is that there are different funding needs to be able to achieve what you need to achieve. And the different funding needs, some of it can come from private sector, but some of it has to come from public sector. For instance, developing the infrastructure that's needed that the private sector would not come in, or the just transition, the compensation that's needed as you transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy. You need to compensate the sectors that are negatively impacted. That needs to come from government. And then you need to have, there's a lot of risk for this long-term investments in these different types of infrastructure. There's where public as well as external funding like multilateral development banks can come in with guarantees, concessional funding to crowd in the large amount of private sector investments that's needed. But all that needs to be underpinned by clear policies, clear regulations, including the relative price of carbon taxes, carbon pricing, as well as all the reforms and institutional changes that need to underpin that. And that is really the crux of it. And just to close with what the World Bank Group is doing, since May 2021, we came out with a new climate change action plan where we have increased the commitment for climate finance from 30% to 35% of our climate finance and 50% to adaptation. This is in line with what Alak Sharma mentioned as the Pact in Glasgow that came out. So just to report to you, in the last financial fiscal year, we already contributed 26 billion to the climate finance for developing countries. And now we are working with developing countries to support them in two ways. One is to develop that country platform and country-specific strategies for the low-carbon development, prioritize where the climate action should be, so the what and the how, what are the changes needed, and then provide some of the catalytic funding, including guarantees, but it cannot be done alone. It has to be done with the government, with other regional development banks, and most importantly, crowding in the private sector. And here we do see a change in the financial institutions. We heard Indika mentioning their net zero commitments. We also see financial institutions have net zero commitments. The issue again is, okay, I have a net zero commitment. I do want to invest in the low carbon investments, but where are they? Where's the pipeline of projects? And can they be measured to show that I am investing in low carbon and it's not greenwashing? So there's a lot of issues in terms of the underlying policies that lead you to understanding that there is the impact on lowering greenhouse gas emissions, including also achieving growth, development, and poverty reduction.
Thank you
Let me close there.
for providing the clarity on the rationale that we need policy clarity in order to shift finance. We need the scale of public finance to leverage private finance via blended finance mechanisms. We need innovative financing tools, and we need to solve this via an intersectional approach. I know we're running out of time, but I also know we started a bit late. So I'm going to ask one last question, rapid fire, 30 seconds each, to each of the speakers. My question is, paint us a picture of Indonesia's low carbon green future. What does it look like to you, and where does youth fit into this photo? 30 seconds, and then I'll close the panel. You should start. Go ahead, Miss Esti.
Kind of put on the spot, yeah, to imagine very quickly. But you know, the future that I see Indonesia heading, especially as with regards to, you know, we talked about energy transition, we talked about how to, you know, combat deforestation and so forth. I see more of us using electric vehicles. We see more charging stations across the country. I know this is something that we're currently working on, and we're seeing substantial progress in this. I'm hoping that more people are opting and are choosing, you know, vehicles that are more environmentally friendly. I see societies that are a lot more aware with their actions, so how they can really just change their own behaviors, right? I think it's so important for us to really look internally. How can I make a difference? And so, you know, I see communities who are more aware in, you know, waste management, in taking care of their waste, in living more sustainably. You know, this is something that we hope to see in the future, and I'm quite optimistic that we can reach this target.
Great, thank you. 30 seconds, Mr. Arshad. Paint us the photo.
I just want to share about Indonesian goal of 2045. 2045, we call it the golden time, where we want to be the 5th largest economy of the world. And what you will see is a symbol of Indonesia of 2005 with our new city. It's called the new capital city, where you see the first perhaps capital city with revenues from carbon credit, where you can actually have their track for prevention of health, and you can do cycling to go to the office. You have electric vehicles there. You have energy, which is green energy, which is from hydro, from solar, and that is actually the future of Indonesia, or the symbol of Indonesia.
Thank you. And Dr. Marie, 30 seconds. What does the green future of Indonesia look like to you?
Indonesia is on the right trajectory, and it has the opportunity to really achieve green, resilient, and inclusive development. It has the nature-based solution potential of the carbon sinks from the food and land use opportunities, forests, mangroves, the blue economy, and it can also affect on the demand side, how to really have the power sector transition to clean energy, just transition, obviously, decarbonization in the transport sector, and really an integrated spatial and capital investment planning that will really reduce emissions arising from urban expansion and tree cover losses. So a lot of opportunity, and really what is needed is political commitment and support from everybody, from the international community, from the financial sector, and youth. You've got to keep on reminding us that this is really the path forward.
What a great note to end on. I don't think I need to give a closing statement. So please keep the applause going for the Honorable Ms. Dia Roro Esti, Bapak Arshad Rashid, Dr. Marie Elka Pangetsu, and the Right Honorable Mr. Alak Sharma. Thank you so much.
Thank you, our moderator and our speakers. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, please give big applause to our great moderator and also our speakers for this third talk show. Bapak Arshad Rashid, Ibu Dia Roro Esti, Ibu Marie Elka Pangestu, and also Mr. Alak Sharma, and for the moderator, Ibu Jody and Chushuan Wang. Thank you for leading us to this fruitful discussion. Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, before we moving to our next session, I would like to inform to all of you that the Y20 Indonesia Summit 2022 from recovery to resilience, rebuilding the youth agenda beyond COVID-19 is hosted by Indonesian Youth Diplomacy, supported by provincial government of DKI Jakarta and Enjoy Jakarta, the regional government of West Java Province, sponsored by Luang, GoTo, Bank Central Asia, Hanoto Foundation, PT Bayan, Resources Tbk, Kadin Indonesia, Moya Group, LG Electronics Indonesia, powered by Zoom and supported by the Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises of the Republic of Indonesia and the following state-owned enterprises, which are driving force of the country's economic growth: Wijaya Karya, Utama Karya, BRI, Inderni, Jasa Marga, Pos Indonesia, PT Ade Karya Persero Tbk, Krakatau Steel, Pelabuhan Indonesia, Taspen, ASDP Indonesia Ferry. And we also like to inform to all of you that you can visit Y20 Expo virtually. So please visit our virtual expo through y20-indonesia.org and click virtual expo button. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, we will have another session, the fourth talk show. But before that, we will having a sharing session with a Gojek driver. But before we do, we would like to show you an inspiring video from Gojek.
Namaku Jacinta. Kata mama, sejak kecil aku sudah tidak bisa mendengar. Aku terlahir sebagai tunarungu. Duniaku adalah dunia yang sunyi. Beruntung aku punya mama yang berinisiatif dan tidak hanya menerima nasib. Meski nggak ada biaya untuk membawa aku terapi, mama nggak pernah bosan ngajarin aku berbicara.
Ada burung lewat, Ma, itu suaranya bagaimana? Saya bingung kan, saya nangis. Bagaimana suruh ngikutin suara burung yang beda-beda.
Mama melatih aku membaca gerak bibir orang sampai aku bisa berbicara dan terlihat sama dengan anak-anak lainnya. Meski baru menggunakan alat bantu dengar sejak aku SMA, aku bisa bergaul dengan anak-anak lainnya. Mama itu sosok perempuan hebat. Mama sudah menjadi driver Gojek sejak tahun 2017. Di dalam kebisingan dunia yang tidak bisa kudengar ini, aku bisa dengar tangis dalam doa mama. Waktu ada informasi soal beasiswa Gojek, mama bilang agar aku mencoba. Alhamdulillah, aku lulus seleksi. Sekarang, aku adalah mahasiswi Prodi Penerbitan Jurnalistik di Politeknik Negeri Jakarta. Aku ingin bikin mama bangga. Sekarang, giliranku untuk belajar lebih keras. Mama adalah suara terindah yang selalu menyemangatiku. Buatku, mama bukan sekedar ibu. Mama inspirasiku. Mama adalah guru bagi kehidupanku.
Okay, please give applause. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat. So for this session, before we go into the next talk show, for the fourth talk show for this beautiful evening. We will hear inspiring stories for this session. So I would like to invite our beautiful moderator for this session from Y20 Indonesia 2022 Fracture for Diversity and Inclusion, Ibu Disti Winata. Please give warm applause. Ibu Disti Winata. Selamat malam, Ibu Disti. Selamat malam. The stage is yours, Ibu.
Thank you everybody for the enthusiasm. So good evening, distinguished guests, Y20 delegates and observers, as well as young people tuning in from around the world. It is my honor to moderate this sharing session tonight. And I'd like to introduce you to Ibu Suparti. Ibu Suparti has been a Gojek driver partner since 2017. In a field that is still male dominated, she's one of the top quality drivers on the Gojek platform. Her daughter, Jacinta, who you saw in the video, is also here with us. Give a round of applause to Jacinta. And as you saw earlier in the video, even though Jacinta is a person with a hearing disability, thanks to her mother's love and prayer, she is now able to pursue her dreams as a journalist. Come join with me, Ibu Suparti. Silakan gabung, Ibu. Silakan duduk, Ibu. And without further ado, let's start this sharing session. So how this session is going to go is that I will ask questions to Ibu Suparti in English, and then I will ask the question again in Bahasa Indonesia, and Bu Suparti bisa jawab saya dalam Bahasa Indonesia. Bu Suparti will then answer the questions in Indonesian, and I will translate this again in English. So it's a quite dynamic session, but hopefully it's an exciting one. Yes. And let's jump right in. So the first question to you, Ibu, why did you join as a Gojek driver partner? And what has been your motivation to stay as a driver partner for the past 5 years? Jadi pertanyaan pertama saya untuk Ibu, apa sih alasan Ibu bergabung sebagai mitra Gojek dan apa motivasi Ibu selama ini dalam 5 tahun terakhir?
Alasan saya jadi mitra Gojek karena suami saya lama, saya menopang ekonomi saya, terutama untuk buat masa depan saya, karena saya punya anak juga yang istimewa, perlu pendidikan juga perlu masa depan.
Future.
Thank you so much, Ibu. So Ibu Suparti just said that the reason that she joined Gojek in the first place is because of the current family condition at that time. Even though the husband didn't have a stable job, she works really hard because she wants to provide a secure and safe future for her children, given that their children have special condition, which was the disability of hearing. So the next question to you, Ibu, is that I'd like to know the challenges that you face as a female Gojek driver partner in such a male-dominated field. How does Gojek actually help you to earn a meaningful livelihood? Could you tell us the types of support that Gojek gives to you as a female driver? Nah, pertanyaan saya ke Ibu adalah tantangan yang Ibu hadapi selama ini sebagai mitra perempuan Gojek. Sebenarnya,
so what has been your challenge as a female Gojek driver? What has Gojek given to you to earn a meaningful livelihood? So what are the support that has been provided by Gojek as female drivers? So the first challenge is because I am a mother, I need to be able to divide my time between the time that I need to dedicate to my children and my time as a driver. In the beginning, it is very difficult, very challenging, but through time, I can find the sweet spot to find the balance between finding the time for my children and
that you know your mothers, and we have mothers in the room, that time management is the most difficult challenge. And just like Ibu Suparti, she's getting used to it and she can balances her time. And kalau dukungan Gojek apa aja, Bu?
Dukungan Goto itu
what are the support that Gojek has given to you? So there are many types of support that has been given to me, especially for the utilization of the application. In the go-to applications, there is a guideline. So for each of the driver, we will get that guideline on how to use the app, and we can use the app to drive better, to manage our finances, and also to find opportunities like scholarship for.
Ibu Suparti just also said that Gojek equips her in the driver app that it has an educational platform that teaches her a lot of stuff from road safety training all the way to financial literacy. And last but not least, her most favorite part is the educational skills. And because of that, she also learns that there is a Gojek Swadaya scholarship program. So since we're entering the topic of education, let me ask the rest of the questions about education. So Ibu, in your view, why is higher education important for young people? Menurut Ibu, kenapa sih pendidikan itu sangat penting bagi kaum muda?
Pendidikan itu penting.
Education is very important, especially for this advanced era that we are in. Although I'm not educated, my children has to be educated. I cannot hear her. There's a problem with her mic. I want my children to have a brighter future. I want to support my children to have a better future.
Right, well, we figured out the mic problem. I'm just going to translate Bu Suparti's response. She was saying that education is essential to survive and to compete in today's era. And even though she thought it was okay for her not to have high education, she truly believed that their children shouldn't stop learning and they should go to college. And everybody agrees that education is quite important, right? Yes. Dan Ibu mungkin bisa cerita terhadap perjalanan
And
Jacinta.
perhaps you can also share with us the journey of Jacinta from when Jacinta finds the scholarship to how the scholarship has helped her to reach her dream. So initially, thankfully, my child Jacinta always gets a good rank in her classroom from elementary school to high school. She is very diligent. So I continue to support her. I encourage her to try to apply for the Gojek scholarship, and he followed my advice. And now she is in the 5th semester of her study. And this is something that was completely unexpected.
Of high school because she works so hard and she has a remarkable educational achievement. So she's always been in the top 3 all the way up to high school. And at that time, Bu Suparti has actually accompanied her throughout the selection process up until that she actually passed the selection process and received the Gojek Swadaya scholarship free of tuition. She's now sitting at the second. She's now sits at the 2nd year of the Jakarta State Polytechnic with free tuition fees from the Gojek Scholarship Program because of her strong will and also excellent achievements. And of course, this wouldn't go without the support of the parents as well, such as Ibu Suparti. And last but not least, Ibu, as the Y20 delegates will continue to sharpen the policy proposals starting tomorrow, particularly around the topics of inclusive education, do you have any message to young people when it comes to their education? Jadi besok itu para delegasi Y20
So
juga.
tomorrow the Y20 delegates will start the negotiation regarding the policy proposal, and one of the topic is inclusive educations. Do you have a message for the Y20 delegates who are here? And what will be your message about youth educations? My message is hopefully my children who are with disabilities like my daughter, I hope that they can be supported. So please kindly pay sufficient attention to students and children with disability, especially for her future. Please understand that although they have disabilities, they also have their
factor because it has such an incredible impact on young people. For example, in case of Jacinta, who is a person of disability, it helps her earn a better future. It secures a meaningful livelihood, and it helps her to be resilient as young people to tackle today's and future challenges. And she said also that limitation shouldn't be seen as an obstacle, rather as a fire that ignites within us to work hard, to chase our dreams, and to pray that all of our efforts are worthwhile. And last but not least, her message is that to you as a Y20 delegate is that when you persevere, you would excel. And only when you're serious about something, then you can truly succeed. With that said, I think Bu Suparti closed off with such a high note, such a remarkable message to end this sharing session. Thank you so much again. Terima kasih banyak Ibu Suparti for your inspiring story and wisdom. And it is really the everyday heroes like Ibu Suparti who truly believes in the power of education that the young people really need to take with them as change makers to realize a diverse and inclusive society. So I wish that all parents are supportive like Bu Suparti who worked so hard to help build a better future for Jacinta and also young people like her. So thanks again so much Ibu Suparti. Terima kasih banyak atas sharing sessionnya.
Thank you very much Ibu Suparti for your sharing. And with that, saya
Okay, please give warm applause to the one and only Ibu Suparti. Berikan tepuk tangan yang meriah dan hangat untuk Ibu Suparti. And then thank you Ibu Destiwinata for leading for this very inspiring stories. Sebelum kita berlanjut ke sesi berikutnya, before moving to the next session, I would
next
like
sessions.
welcome to the all media, please. Taking a photo together, Ibu Destiwinata dan Ibu Suparti. Okay, Ibu Suparti, aba-aba berfoto dari saya. Please give your best smile. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more. Bu Disti dan juga Ibu Suparti, satu kali lagi. Okay. Give your best smile, the last smile. 1, 2, 3. Okay, thank you very much. Terima kasih Ibu Destiwinata and Ibu Suparti. May return to your seat. Silahkan kembali ke tempat duduknya. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, already join us. Please welcome Vice Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy of the Republic of Indonesia, Ibu Angela Tanusudibyo. Terima kasih. Selamat malam, good evening. Thank you for coming, Ibu Angela. Okay, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat, ladies and gentlemen, as I said earlier that we still have another session, another talk show, the fourth talk show for this evening. So for this fourth talk show, oh okay, and also Ibu Rahayu. Oh okay,
Just a couple of announcements while we're waiting for the setup. First of all, thank you so much again to all speakers, to my colleague, and to Angela. Thank you so much for coming tonight. Just quick tidbits. First of all, I wanted to remind everyone, because tonight we're on the Sustainable and Livable Planet track, just earlier for the talk show, that you can calculate your carbon footprint. We are carbon offsetting our conference from the Y20 organizers as part of walking the talk and not just talking the talk. So we're ensuring, thank you, that means we'll be planting a lot of mangroves, quite a lot of mangroves. And for those of you who are interested in offsetting your carbon footprint, I'm sure your DRO has either given you the information already or will be giving you the information you need. If you don't already have it yet, we'll give you the link for you to be able to calculate your carbon footprint. And we are doing all of that with Carbon Ethics. So thank you so much, Carbon Ethics, for coming alongside with us. And secondly, we actually have a smart bin by Jubelo, a smart bin that you can use. I'm sure it's located outside of in the hallway. It has the sign Jubilo. Our DROs will be able to show you, our LOs will be able to show you if you have plastics or any recyclables that you want to throw away, you can throw away in those bins, and they'll actually calculate how much it costs, as in, maybe even give you your money back for that. Hey, smart. So that's why it's called a smart bin. So we're working together with Jubilo. Thank you so much, Jubilo, for the smart bin. We're also doing waste management with Waste for Change for all our waste here in Jakarta. So again, we are walking the talk and not just talking the talk. Hopefully all of you will come on board to help us throw away, by setting aside the organics and non-organics. But basically for the non-organics, anything that's recyclable, we have the smart bins, and please feel free to offset your carbon footprint. Lastly, please feel free to tell all your friends about the first ever Y20 Virtual Expo. It's a chance, and actually there's still some booths available. So in case any of you or your organizations, this is part of selling you some booths, okay? So anyone who have organizations or know of any companies who would be interested, we want all those organizations and companies from your countries to actually take part in the virtual expo, because it's completely virtual, which means it can be accessed from anywhere around the world 24 hours a day until the end of our presidency in November. So come and see me if you would like more information on the virtual expo. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ibu Rahayu, for the welcome greetings. Once again, thank you so much. Okay, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang terhormat. So now we're going to the next, our fourth talk show, where we're talking about diversity and inclusion. Allow me to introduce you, our moderator for this talk show is Ms. Soyeon Kim, an inclusive and intuitive youth opinion leader, majoring in political science and international relations at Kyunghee University. As an undergraduate in her senior year, she is passionate and studying hard to work as a career diplomat in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She also worked as a research assistant at Bumsok Pact, one of the members of the UNHRC Advisory Committee, and got awarded the Minister Prize at the 2021 Model G20 Summit in the Republic of South Korea. So let me invite the one and only our moderator for this talk show, Ms. Soyeon Kim, Y20 South Korean Delegate to Y20 Indonesia 2022. Ms. Soyeon Kim, the stage is yours.
Thank you. So, good evening, fellow Y20 delegates, observers, and distinguished guests. Welcome to the Diversity and Inclusion Talk Show, High Panel Talk Show, where we have such high panel panelists joining us in this exciting session. It's such an honor to moderate this session, and this is my first time moderating this huge sessions. Thanks for organizing committee for giving me the opportunity. I hope everyone can learn fruitful insights from this talk show. So let's begin with the introduction of the DI track and what we have discussed so far and overall progressions. Over the past few months, the diversity and inclusion delegates have devoted themselves to tackle two thematic areas: inclusive education and the creative economy and the world of work, and other specific issues from intersectionality, mental health, leadership, technology, to their implementation strategy with diverse and inclusive perspectives. Throughout the policy formulation and consultations, we are making a continuous effort to address issues that are faced marginalized/vulnerable groups, as well as people with disabilities in a holistic way. In doing so, we made insightful and concrete policy proposals in the communique, and we are still
our own way to elaborate such ideas, which will later be reflected on our final communique and the annexes. So we need to work for the annexes more hard. And even though the diversity and inclusion is a new priority area at this year's Y20 Summit, we are hopeful that the timely and actionable recommendation policies can be taken into consideration by the G20 member states and also the summits. Now, I would like to invite Minister Sandi to share his opening remark. So, Santiago Sahalahuddin Uno is the Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy of the Republic of Indonesia. Welcome.
Thank you, Ms. Kim, and from this beautiful Lake Toba, the sites of the super priority destinations, I would like to say Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good evening and warmest greeting to you all. I would like to be there in person as I already planned with Sarah and the team, with Disty and Michael, who came to my office. But I've just gotten the instructions yesterday by the coordinating minister for Maritime and Investments, Bapak Luhut, to be here for the coordinating sessions in relations to our preparations for the infrastructure build-up for the super priority destinations. So I really apologize. I could not be there, but I have been listening for the last 90 minutes, and it actually gave me great insights. The story that the Ms. Supariyati, the Gojek driver, and the daughter share, and it's amazingly touching how the technology is taking center stage to provide empowerment, and this actually gives us some boost of recognitions that our most valuable assets are tenacity, creativity, intellectual property, and most of all, entrepreneurship. So thank you very much for including me in this talk show. I would like to say a long remarks, and there's actually speech being prepared, but I'll be very brief. I want to share that our programs to recover post-pandemic is actually building and stimulating, enhancing these assets that I have just said. How imaginations and younger generations work together towards sustainable and inclusive development, empowering aspiring micro and small medium enterprises. It is our crucial task together with the Y20 to highlight how certain things like intellectual property rights can be used to elevate the ability for access to financing, and also develop a program that could jointly promote and market the creative economy products as well as destinations for tourism. We understand that Indonesia is now building and improving competence together with the other G20 members on human capital, in particular the younger generations of millennials and Gen Z. And that's why we at the Ministry of Tourism and Creative Economy we are very happy to report that out of our 3,000 workforce, 55% are Gen Z and millennials. And this is more remarkable for you, Sarah, and the team, that 60% of our leadership positions in the ministry are held by women. So the Vice Minister was very beautiful, who is very beautiful and young, is a woman, and the Permanent Secretary is a woman. 4 out of 7 deputies are women. And the Minister himself is also controlled by women, at least at home. So we would like to mention how We're very delightful that Y20 is finishing its round. I participated in the Manokwari sessions, and I highlighted the impact of digitizations, innovations, and sustainable business practices, including social entrepreneurship. So, to sum it all, as a conclusion, let's step up our efforts to revive and create more jobs through adaptations, innovation, and collaborations. We're on track to create 1.5 million new jobs this year and 4.4 million jobs by 2024. This is actually very, very strategic because the pandemic caused a lot of loss for income, and a lot of stakeholders lost their opportunities and also the jobs that is being needed to recover the economy. So we need to focus on young, creative, innovative minds to provide us with inputs and ideas and suggestions to move forward for rebuilding, recovering better, recovering stronger, and most definitely recovering better. Let's expand business opportunity, create empowering SMEs, women, as well as youth for the sustainable of tourism and creative economy. One thing before I close, we are very delighted to share our ambitious net zero strategy. The country is setting of 2060 for net zero. We have now adopted the Glasgow 2021 resolutions, whereby by 2035, we would like to halve our emissions for the carbon footprint from the creative economy and tourism sectors by 4%. And we are trying to hit the net zero target by 2035 to 2040. So we're looking forward to your recommendation, inputs, and proposed solutions. I would like to thank you from the bottom of my heart, and please accept my apologies for not being there in person, but I'm there basically giving all my hearts to all participants. Thank you very much, and God bless you all. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Minister, for your opening remarks. I believe that in here there are SLP delegates and also the other DI delegates and YE and also DT delegates will work harder to meet the net zero, of course, and maybe we can make the corresponding proposals for that. And prior to introducing each speaker, a few days ago, I had the opportunity to meet Her Excellency Sharma by the Zoom and doing the interview. So Her Excellency Sharma is the Minister of the Youth Department from the United Arab Emirates, but she couldn't join us in person tonight. So we had pre-recorded a video, and I will give the short biography of her. Her Excellency Sharma was appointed as the UAE's Minister of State of Youth for Youth Affairs in February 2016 at the age of 22. She is also the chair of Emirates Youth Council and the vice chair of the Arab Youth Center. She serves as a chairperson for Special Olympics UAE and as the Secretary General of the Education and Human Resources Council in the UAE and a board member of Emirates Foundation and the International Institute of Tolerance. So please. This is a video record.
Sharma bin Suhail. I'm Soyeon Kim, the head of delegation of the Republic of Korea, as well as the moderator for the Q&A session in the high-level talk show of diversity and inclusion track in Y20 Indonesia 2022. It's such an honor to have an interview with you, Your Excellency, today, and I hope this Q&A session could deliver fruitful insights for Y20 delegates. Following a brief introduction to what diversity and inclusion track has been discussed and which topic has been chosen by the drafting processes of communique between all four tracks, a total of 3 questions from the Y20 delegates will be given to you. The goals of this high-level panel talk show are to empower and inspire youth in the G20 and beyond to explore innovative ways to address global challenges, promote dialogues between youths, experts, leaders, and other key stakeholders, and initiate a vision for a more diverse and inclusive society where young people are active contributors to close social and economic inequalities. Without further ado, shall we begin?
Of course, please.
The first question is about your amazing career and your ambition for the future of youth. Your Excellency, you made a remarkable achievement as you became a minister at the age of 22. As a minister representing youth in the government, what initiatives do you have to make sure that there is space for youth and its diversity to participate in decision-making processes?
So, first of all, hello, Jakarta. And it's such a pleasure and delight to be with all the youth here today participating in the Y20. We have a number of initiatives in place that ensure youth are at the helm of the decision-making process in the UAE and that their voices are actively taken into consideration when forming policies, launching projects, and creating initiatives catering to their needs. The UAE epitomizes engaging and empowering youth, but how does this translate to reality? And I think that's one question you might be thinking. Well, it translates in a very simple and clear way. Creating youth councils, one, at every level to ensure that their voices are mainstream. And this includes our Emirates Youth Council that reports directly to Cabinet, overseeing all legislation and policies affecting youth. It also includes our youth councils in every emirate under the executive councils of each of our 7 emirates, working on local projects in that emirates and on local policies, but also youth councils at ministries who work on a diverse range of topics from climate change to sustainability to the Ministry of Interior to education to human resources. It extends to having councils as well in the private sector that ensure that young people are represented in every field and every level. The second point is we also created a policy to mandate having at least one young person in the board of directors of every federal entity in the country with the same rights and opportunities as other board members. The third is in 2021, we launched an initiative to train youth to become parliamentarians to actively participate in shaping the UAE's policies in our Federal National Council, which is our parliament. Lastly, our oldest and most cherished initiative to mainstream the voice of youth in decision-making is called Youth Circles. It's a signature event and platform that enables decision makers to have consultations and sessions and dialogues on a whole range of projects. And you can access it through our Youth Circles website. This is basically the UAE's method of engaging young people. Constant, sustainable, ongoing dialogue that really feeds into our decision-making process.
I'm so happy to hear all the initiatives that you have been gone through, and I guess the Youth Council, idea of the Youth Council also included in the Y20 communique this year. I'm so grateful that we had reflected the international law and also Your Excellency's initiatives in our communique this year. So the next question refers to the issue of youth representation. In many youth fora, including Y20 summits over the years, the topics of leadership and youth participation have been regular discussions. While we see more and more youth running at the government and parliament level worldwide, in your view, is putting a sufficient amount of quota for youth in order to ensure their representation in decision-making processes matter the most of them? And do you believe that this quota can enhance youth representation?
You raise a very good question. Putting a quota is not enough. For true empowerment to happen, the value of listening to youth and understanding their importance must come first. And this notion must be ingrained into our DNA as governments. And to be honest, it has been ingrained in our DNA by the UAE's leadership to really include all members of society, not just youth, in the decision-making process. In the UAE, we believe that the potential of youth is boundless and unlimited. And the United Arab Emirates leadership really believe that every young person has the ability to grow and contribute impactfully, and that it's the government's duty to ensure
and provide optimal conditions and the environment for these young people to learn, to develop, to become active members of society. The future of our nation relies heavily on our youth's potential to carry the vision of this country forward and elevate it even further and raise the bar. And this is why we believe it's important for them to be included, not just as quota, but because they will really inherit this nation and genuinely need to have a voice. And they need to be able to actively contribute in shaping that future, but also authentically contributing to it.
Thank you for the response. I'd like to address one more follow-up question regarding your answer, which is, even if there are like profound implications for promising youth, like Your Excellency and Greta Thunberg, there are many promising youth worldwide. I believe that one challenge youth might overcome is the widespread tendency of prejudice or discrimination on the grounds of a person's age, that the younger is not smarter than the older. As a politician who took office at a very young age, could you address whether and how you dealt with any obstacles in this regard?
So you raise a very important question on what kind of obstacles do we face. I believe in the UAE, we look at obstacles as opportunities. And to be frank, it's always a continuous learning practice where if we face a roadblock, we try to say, okay, where are we here? Are we focusing on effectiveness or efficiency? What is the problem? What is the root cause? And I think one of the things when we face challenges, a lot of people try to address the symptom, especially with respect to youth. And I think we need to all, as decision makers, go back to the root cause and understand how is it affecting a young person's life? Where's the government's role? Where can we interfere, but also not interfere so much that we step into kind of the territory or kind of rights of young people to express their own solutions to these challenges as well.
Thank you. I guess these ideas and all the opinions from you, Your Excellency, I guess this can help Y20 delegates to facilitate their drafting processes and finalizing it. And I guess this is something that I had to write in my journal and in front of my desk. Thank you for your response. And the last question is the vision of your own. As a youth, I would like to know what values do you live by? And how do you encourage our youths to assume leadership positions and become leaders in their own ways?
You asked a very powerful and important question. I love values and value-based leadership. You excited me. There's so many values that I've learned along the way in this journey. One is the power of focus is unrivaled. What we set our sight on and how we create it brings us insight and power and effectiveness. Two, the value of preparedness as well. While we can acknowledge that luck plays a role, we often use that as a kind of excuse to avoid doing what we can do to intelligently prepare for opportunities. As they say, luck favors the prepared mind. Perseverance and hard work go hand in hand. Integrity is another value. This is a big one. When no one's watching, do you do the little things you know are best for you? Another value of continuous learning, always practice lifelong learning, read beyond the headlines and immerse yourself in it every single day, even if it's just for 15 minutes. The value of embracing uncertainty, and this is a big one, especially after COVID-19 and the pandemic. Embracing uncertainty is essential to the very fact that life is uncertain. Maybe my last two values and kind of advices would be draw into your roots to flourish in hardship. Pain and painful experiences can be catalysts rather than simple barriers. And they say growing pains, right? Because there's growth from pain. And overcoming the resistance is what creates the change, and growth in and of itself creates strength and beauty. The crisis is part of the solution, not the barrier to it. Finally, work and live from a place of passion. John O'Leary in his book On Fire gets to the heart of this. And he, to be honest, changed my life. He writes that life will always throw some new challenge our way, and this is exactly why it's important to live life on fire. and live your life full of potential and excitement, enjoying all that you have and not worrying about the struggles that may disrupt your existence. So that's my 2 cents, Sion.
So I appreciate for your sincere responses. And as much as we would love to have you next week, we are still grateful that you have this time to share your insights with Y20 delegates and all the youth worldwide. In closing, do you have any other messages for our Y20 delegates and the youth all over the world?
My 2 cents is the importance of us as young people showcasing our authentic voice and working hard with our governments to empower other youth, but also take into consideration how we can contribute and be part of the solution, how we can use ourselves as assets and leverage us as assets to solve and overcome problems, not the old kind of tokenism where youth are problems to solve. I think that shift in focus where we even see ourselves empowered, and instead of being inspired by others, why don't we inspire our own self as young people and be self-inspired? I think that's the most important as well, and infuse that with courage. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. At one time, I would like to see you in person and hear more about your insights and your experiences. So thank you so much for inviting us to have an interview with you, Your Excellency. And I would like to close the session, and then we'll move on to the other Q&A sessions and the venue in Jakarta. Thank you.
Once again, I'd like to express gratitude Her Excellency Sharma for joining us interview as a virtual by Zoom. It was such an inspiring interview for me as a woman and as a who wants to be an aspiring diplomat. And maybe I should also place the quote from John O'Reilly that she had quoted, that the life will always throw some challenges our way in front of my desk back home to keep myself motivated. I believe the insights she addressed can be elaborated in our final communique. And without further ado, we would like to start. So before I introduce each speaker's biography in detail, I'd like to kindly remind all speakers to keep our response to a maximum of 3 minutes in order to ask the official questions from us in a timely manner and within the time limits. So I'd like to welcome Her Excellency Angela Haryani Thanose Divijo to the stage. Her Excellency Angela had been appointed to the Vice Minister of Tourism and Creative Economy of Indonesia in October 2019 at the age of 32, and she was the youngest in the entire Indonesian cabinet. She oversees national projects, including several national economic recovery programs for the tourism and creative economy industry, particularly for the hotel, film, culinary, crafts, and fashion sectors. Thank you for joining us here in the interview.
Thank you for having me. It's such an honor to be here and to be amongst distinguished participants and speakers. And I can see that everyone in here is young, so I don't feel left out like usual. So thank you for having me.
Yes, then maybe we will just move on to our questions. First question is about the sustainable tourism. So like sustainable tourism and one of your ministry priorities in post-pandemic recovery, as well as a rising trend around the world. So while sustainable tourism is generating significant multiplier effects on social inclusion, economic empowerment, and lowering ecological impact, oftentimes the concept of sustainability is seen as a compromise over an emphasis on leisure and service to attract customers. So in your view, how can sustainable tourism connect sectors such as governments, private, creative youth, and others, and advance sustainable development?
Okay, well, first of all, I want to emphasize that sustainable tourism does not compromise with tourism activities that attracts the travelers. I believe, on the contrary, sustainable tourism actually adds value to tourism experiences. To give you an example, if you go to Bali, in the West Bali in Menjangan, I don't know if you, any of you've been there. So there is one beautiful ecotourism resort called Lataran, and they provide the guests with many activities like trekking, bird watching, mangrove planting. There's a lot of educational activities. So it adds value to the tourism experience. If you go to Yogyakarta, there is this one, it's one of the best village tourism by UNWTO in 2021. It's called Langran. And in there, you can basically live like the locals. You can stay with them, and then you can learn about the local culture. And that's what sustainability is all about. So it adds value to the tourism experience. And on top of that, like you said, sustainable tourism really helps us to preserve the environment, the culture, and give positive socio-economic effects. So the ministry, the tourism and creative economy ministry, we've been trying to mainstreaming the concept of sustainable tourism. Why? Because we see the benefit of it. And we see that if we build this sustainable tourism in Indonesia, it could be our unique selling point for Indonesia. And you know what? A lot of studies have shown that the awareness of sustainability issue actually has increased due to the pandemic, especially among the youth. And this is an opportunity for us. Not so it's not only a concept anymore. It's not a theory anymore. It's an opportunity for us to grab together. We have to build the sustainability tourism here in Indonesia. So in order to do that, I believe that we need to make a thriving ecosystem for sustainable practices in the tourism sector. Because the issue today is how to make sustainable tourism businesses be profitable. That's, I think, one of the critical issues. If we can make them, we can help them to be profitable, I believe there will be a lot of investment towards this sector. And that's what we've been doing. Together with the industry, we've attract a lot of green investment towards the sector. For example, the green transportation. We also just launched this carbon footprint calculator and offsetting. So I was so pleased that Ibu Rahayu just mentioned that this is we have an eco carbon offsetting program in this event because we have the same thing. So now travelers can choose to calculate their carbon footprint when they travel to Indonesia, and they can plant mangrove in Indonesia. So that's a program that we just launched. And we have a lot of program on waste management in Indonesia. We built and we develop a travel pattern for ecotourism, for wellness tourism, and village tourism. And those are the things that we are doing right now. And we know we have to do more. And hopefully, with the help of the youth, we can do more in the future.
Yes, thanks for your remark. I also believe that the sustainability and also profitable business can be in line with in the tourism in Indonesia. And I also heard that in Indonesia that the number of tourists have upsurged because we can have a private tourism in Indonesia cities. So I think that really we can get the importance of that. And the second question is about regarding women and youth empowerment in the tourism sector. It is a very important issue for us as a DI track. So in the G20 Tourism Working Group, one of the 5 pillars is women and youth empowerment. Could you share with us what types of support the G20 can do to help female and young workers in the tourism and creative economy to be resilient to the post-COVID-19? And also, what can we do as the Y20 delegates and young people listening to this talk show to support the tourism working group's recommendations?
All right. Let me give you an update on what we're working on. We are finalizing the first draft of the G20 Bali Guidelines, which contains policy recommendation, best practices, and most importantly, concrete actions that the G20 member countries could implement. So in the pillar of women and youth empowerment, various issues have been raised, including tackling the gender pay gap. I think that's very important. Advancing the woman's role. So how can we push women's role to be more strategic? And providing the proper training for youth. Because, for example, Indonesia, more than 50% is youth. So it is very important for us to equip them with the proper training for the future jobs. And to the Y20 delegates and the young people listening to this event, your support of the Tourism Working Group's recommendation will mean a lot to us. And you can definitely support us by actively raising awareness of gender inclusivity in your respective community and workplace and create an action plan. And other than that, specifically on the tourism sector, we have initiated a platform for the tourism youth community back in 2016 with more than 18,000 members. So if you join us, we can share best practices, we can learn together, and we can definitely contribute to the development of tourism. And finally, we would like to invite you as an observer in our second tourism working group discussion on the 23rd of September, which the outcome will lead to the G20 Bali guidelines and will be endorsed at the Ministerial Tourism meeting on the 26th.
Thank you. I guess we have to include like gender pay gap in our track because we didn't include it in our communique. Maybe we can talk about that. We also mentioned about soft skills for proper training for youth. So I think this is also in line with what you said for the question number 2. So moving on to question number 3, this is a final question to you. So what steps can those like creative economy platforms and maybe platforms in any sectors right now and hubs take to prevent such like malicious or dangerous content from causing harm to youth and making like spreading the fake news or hateful content? How do you think, which steps do we have to like take on?
Right. I think from the platform side, many governments have put pressure for them to be more responsible and take action in regards to fake news, malicious content. And I've seen how they invest in resources to review content and also to take it down if necessary. So we support that. But I think what's important is for us to be on the same side, that today the digital world is lack of digital culture. You know, learning from history, us as human beings, we need to have norms, we need to have values, we need to have boundaries to be able to live together despite our differences, to live peacefully. And I think this goes the same with digital world, digital space. We need to have the right digital culture. This is what's missing right now. And this is very important, especially with the internet user getting younger every day. So this is really necessary for us to address this. And as youth, as leaders, we can make a difference. How? First, we have to set the example, how we interact in the digital space, how we can responsibly interact in the digital space. And secondly, we have to help to increase digital literacy.
Thank you for your response. And I also would like to welcome Najala Shihab to the stage. Ms. Najala is a founder and the head of Sokola.mu, a blended learning platform that provides personalized classes for students at the school management system. Since 2015, She is also founder and sits on the board of trustees of PSPK, or Center of Education and Policy Studies, an independent organization that works to conduct and support research, advocacy, and publication in Indonesia's education policy at various levels. Thank you for joining us this interview.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great session. I've been learning a lot, and I'm excited to share more and also learn more from all the participants.
Yes, I'm so happy to be with two aspiring women in this session.
Actually a great session, all female panel. Yeah, it's real.
Now I would like to ask questions to Najala Shihab. And the first question is that in your work, you have repeatedly stressed the importance of gender inclusivity, including for girls whose learning falls behind boys due to various factors, as well as for women who seek to take on leadership roles in the education space. So as a female leader in the education sector, can you highlight some of the challenges that faces the girls and women they are facing, both from the perspective of their learning and about their aspirations to play a bigger role in promoting equality in your experience?
Yes, I think this is a very important issue because there are a lot of misconception and misunderstanding when we talk about gender inequality or disparity within education. One very interesting fact that might be not unknown to most of you are that actually in terms of the participation number in Indonesia, we don't have any more issues in ensuring that girls can attend school. The numbers of participation for both female and male students have actually been very equal in the past 15 years. So that's good. Another good news, which is maybe familiar for most of the people. In terms of the academic achievement, girls actually outperform boys in all school classes. And that's based on our national assessment and international assessment, which is uncommon compared to other countries. So in terms of the mathematical performance, in terms of science performance. But all of that good news and the head start are actually diminished long time. So if you're looking into leadership position, just like what Angela said earlier, there's a very huge gap in the percentage of women in leadership position, either in private or in governmental sector. Even in education ecosystems itself, the numbers of principals that are women are very, very low, like less than 20% in general, compared to the numbers or the percentage of teachers that are actually female in the ecosystem. So there's not enough role models. There's not enough, there's too many hurdles within the continent after they're finishing their education, which I think portrays a lot of structural barriers once you start the higher educations and then the career development part. So that's the issues, that's where the policy needs to focus more in the next 5 years.
I can easily relate to your experience and your thoughts because also South Korea is lacking like high executive positions who are women. So I think, yeah, we need to move on for that issue. We need more forthcoming agenda setting for that and also policies. So the last question for you, Ms. Najela, is about the role of parents to ensure education for disadvantaged students. You also repeatedly stressed the importance of a multi-stakeholder approach to education involving teachers, governments, and parents, to name a few. And part of your work involves working with families to help improve students' education. So could you please highlight some of the positive ways in which parents can help improve young people's education, especially students from disadvantaged backgrounds, and maybe perhaps more importantly, have you seen any government policies or messages that have been able to empower parents to make these positive outcomes and contributions?
Yes. Let's start by defining parents' involvement because I think one of the problems are actually in that area. You can
easily assume that parents' involvement would mean better results, which is true in most cases, especially with privileged parents. That's very apparent during the pandemic. We're seeing learning loss in a lot of settings, in a lot of undeveloped region, but not on the privileged region. And parents with higher social economic status actually have increased their children's achievement even during the pandemic by being more involved. But again, if we're talking about the purpose of education, then emphasizing that we want the achievement and the success belongs to each and every individual student, I think it's something that very frequently overlooked in our approach. So if you're talking about parental involvement, there are some traps in where the parental involvement actually increase the inequality. First one, if we're talking about parental involvement as the encouragement to invest more time and more resources into your children's school or your children's learning, which the lower and disadvantaged family, basically they don't have that time. They need to work compared to more privileged family. They don't have the resources to fund certain activities at school, etc. And then another way where parental involvement can go wrong is when you define parental involvement as an individual endeavor. So parents being present at school only for the sake of his or her own children. That's why one of the things that we always emphasize on Yayasan Keluarga Kita effort is that parenting is actually a social responsibility. It's never a personal issue, and you cannot be a successful parent. You cannot guarantee success for each and every single one of the child if we don't see this as a community work, if we don't treat all children as our children, if we don't see all families as part of our families. And this is where the strong policy and a certain affirmative actions can really work. One of the initiatives that PSPK worked with the Ministry of Education, with the official government of Jakarta, for example, is changing the whole policy on students' admission to government school, PPDB, all the admission system, where we put a very strict regulations on ensuring that all these disadvantaged families are getting the support and the subsidies needed to quality schools, which previously are very, very limited and only can be accessible to parents and students with higher support, like the one who have access to online learning, the one who have access to extra tutoring, etc. And another thing that we have been working on is parenting education systems that start really, really early, even since before pregnancy, that focus on very, very specific and easy to learn skills. Like even the numbers of words that you talk about with your under 5 children, the numbers of that vocabulary would mean a lot to their academic achievement later on the year. And it doesn't take a lot of money. It doesn't take a certain resources to start speaking in a more varied word with your kids. So those kinds of extra help, extra support to parents can actually make a difference in not only in the short term, but also in the long term achievement and expressing inequality.
Thank you for highlighting such areas that we didn't have thought about at all. I guess we need some kind of education in that regard. And now it's time to ask Richa Gupa for the questions. Thank you for joining us. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So your first question for you is that your work at the Lavia Foundation focuses on social emotional learning, where every dollar spent yields a return of $11 in forms of education, health, employment, ultimately lifting children and youth out of poverty, and have improved well-being. So one of the topics in the Y20 communique negotiations is the importance of mental health, and it's a little bit cross-cutting, and also well-being. So as a youth who works with young people in this sector, how can we make a compelling case of immeasurable aspects such as mental health and social emotional well-being, especially for vulnerable youth, to the government?
Thank you so much for that question. And firstly, thank you so much to the Y20 delegation for being there, for Sarah and the team for organizing all of this. I think to your question, it's very apparent the problem that we are trying to solve. And because of COVID, this problem has become even more amplified in the policy arena and also internationally, which is maybe one of the very, very few good things that happened because of the attention that COVID-19 got. I think to make a compelling case, it's important to understand the problem very deeply, right? And if we look at it in perspective, there are 1.8 billion young people across the world currently, and countries like India, for example, is one of the youngest countries in the world. With about 333 million young people currently in the country. And most young people across the world actually experience something called as multidimensional poverty, which means that we are not only experiencing poverty in the terms of financial, inaccess, but also in terms of unsafe physical environments, emotional environments, all kinds of adversity that we face on the day-to-day. And all of this culminates into some short-term and long-term impact on young people. And the long-term impacts are us not being able to become employable, less chances of pursuing higher education, and of course, deteriorating mental health as we grow into adults and elderly people. And of course, that has an effect on the overall economy, a deficit that it causes. It causes a lack of talent in the space, whether in all sorts of socioeconomic backgrounds. And of course, it causes a lot of other social problems like crime, etc. I think it's important to understand that young people today are going through an ongoing crisis of mental health where they experience anger, shame, demotivation, insecurity every single day. And this problem is even more amplified for young people who come from disadvantaged socioeconomic backgrounds. And so this is the problem that we need to amplify even through the communique that hopefully the delegates will be working on tomorrow onwards. It's important to amplify that this is not only an issue that needs to be spoken about in the education arena, but also in the political arena, also in the international relations arena, and that young people are now opening up about their stories, about the ways that they need support. And it's time for us interagency organizations, everybody, multilaterals, to come together to try and provide the support that young people require today in order to thrive and become not only economically more proficient and be able to sustain themselves, but to really become the global leaders that we want young people to become, right? I think lastly, in the previous panel, I was just listening along and I heard somebody say that youth are the future. And I think that youth are today. We are here today. India is, for example, one of the youngest countries in the world, as I said earlier. And this is the opportunity that we have. And we need to make the most of it. Of course, there are many researchers that back this up. And like you mentioned, there's a research by Columbia University, which also says that every dollar invested in the emotional well-being of children and young people yields a return of $11 in the form of health, education, and economic outcomes. And I think that's something extremely powerful that we can use to make a big case for more investment, more policy changes, and just more attention to mental health and well-being of young people.
Thank you for your sincere response. Since we're running out of time, I would like to ask you two questions, but please keep it short, as at least 45 seconds. The second question is like, oh no, I think I have to short down the questions away. I would like to ask you about the questions. Lastly, is that what are the challenges that you see working with culturally diverse communities? I think it is hard to work with those diverse backgrounds. So please keep it short. It's like 30 seconds.
Absolutely, I will try my best. It's definitely interesting and also difficult and challenging to work with diverse communities. The work that we do at Lab here is to partner with state governments to co-create a localized curriculum around well-being for children who go to public schools. And we do this in partnership with school teachers from diverse backgrounds, master trainers, and of course, government officials. I think the important thing to do in these sort of challenges where we work with multiple stakeholders who have very different expectations is to truly listen to the system. I think while working with the government, we always feel like the government is wrong and there are many loopholes because of the bureaucracy. But the government is made of people who have thoughts to share, who have ideas, and who are really diverse in their own being. And I think it's important to truly listen to the system and really understand what incentivizes them to bring everyone together. A quick example, I know I'm probably running out of time, is when we partner with the state government, we select master trainers and teachers from all the regions of the state, and we include people from indigenous backgrounds, we ensure gender diversity, we also ensure that people from various ranks of the government are coming together, and which brings together a very unique perspective to the curriculum that we create. And of course, children are a big part of the curriculum creation, where they themselves vet and review the curriculum alongside with the executive committee, just like any other process. So I think those are a couple of things that we use to mitigate the challenge of working in a diverse community with various stakeholders.
Thank you for your like concrete experiences and about the challenges that you have faced. And yeah, I'm so sorry, but it's time's up. We have to close the session. So that marks the end of the diversity and inclusion talk show. And also, this is the end. This is a last talk show that we have so far from yesterday. So thanks again for the opportunity for the organizing committee and all the workers who work hard to broadcast this talk show. This photo shoot will follow, so I'd like to ask a favor to remain on the stage, and I will pass the floors to Miss Tiffany. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Now I would like to invite our beautiful moderator and to all speakers to having the photo session together, and also Ibu Rika can also join us virtually. Okay, the marking point. Okay, count them by me. Please be prepared. And 3. Okay. Okay, you need more space. Okay. Okay, perfect. Okay, count down by me. And 3, 2, 1. Okay, one more. Can I have one more? We will have one more. Okay, and 3, 2, 1. Okay, please give warm applause to our speakers. Terima kasih. Thank you, good evening, and also our great moderator for this 4th talk show. To our moderator and our speakers, you may return to your seat. You may return to your table. Thank you. Okay. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu yang kami hormati malam hari ini. So that's what we have today. We have our 3rd and our 4th talk show for today's events, and I'm sure that it will be a good start for our future steps. Unfortunately, we have come to the end of today's agenda. Before we could conclude this day, I would like to say to our partners who have been supporting us from the beginning to this day, the Y20 organizers from every country of G20 members, and also our delegates who have conducive discussions and negotiations ahead. Please give applause to all of you. Thank you very much. Y20 Indonesian Summit 2022, from recovery to resilience, rebuilding the youth agenda beyond COVID-19. This event is hosted by Indonesian Youth Diplomacy, supported by Provincial Government of DKI Jakarta and Enjoy Jakarta, the Regional Government of West Java Province, sponsored by Peluang GoTo, Bank Sentral Asia, Tanoto Foundation, PT Bayan, Resources TBK, Kadin Indonesia, Moya Group, LG Electronics Indonesia, powered by Zoom, and supported by the Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises of the Republic of Indonesia and the following state-owned enterprises, which are driving force of the country's economic growth: Wijaya Karya, Hutama Karya, BRI, Injourney, Jasa Marga, Pos Indonesia, PT Adikarya Persero, TBK, Krakatau Steel, Pelabuhan Indonesia, Taspen, ASDP, Indonesia Ferry. And I will also like to inform to all of you that you can visit Y20 Expo virtually. So please visit our virtual expo through y20-indonesia.org and click Virtual Expo button. Okay, before I close this event tonight, I would like to remind you, please check out tomorrow at 8 a.m. because all of you here will leaving to Bandung at 8:30. So please be sure, do not be late. Once again, tomorrow, please check out at 8 a.m. because all of you have to go to Bandung leaving on 8:30 a.m. in the morning. On behalf of the Y20 coaches and the organizing committee from Indonesia Youth Diplomacy, we thank you for attending the series of Y20 Indonesia Summit 2022 in Jakarta. Thank you very much once again. I am Tiffany Citra Raitama signing off. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Selamat malam. Good evening. See you next time. Terima kasih.
The Ministry of State-Owned Enterprises of the Republic of Indonesia and SOEs play a pivotal role in driving Indonesia forward.
Ongoing major transformation has led Indonesia's state-owned enterprise on the path towards stronger corporate governance, profitability, and resilience.
The Ministry and SOEs are committed to empowering our future workplace and youth employment, advancing our digital transformation, keeping our planet livable for generations to come. And we are empowering our diversity.
Let us all drive our communities, our economy, our nations, and our world forward.
Gue mau investasi aja, tapi nggak ngerti caranya. Jangan khawatir, kamu bisa investasi beragam aset sekarang nggak pakai ribet. Semua ada di aplikasi Peluang. Betul, bisa nabung emas, reksadana, indeks saham Amerika, dan aset lainnya. Hanya dengan 3 klik, kamu bisa investasi praktis, aman, dan berpotensi lebih untung. Kapan lagi? Peluangmu sekarang.
Wika bukan hanya hadir, tetapi turut menorehkan sejarah panjang pembangunan Indonesia, serta tidak ragu reposisi diri menjadi BUMN yang siap berkompetisi di kancah internasional. Baktiku untuk Wika, baktiku untuk Indonesia.
We dedicate each drop of this sweat to you, to the people of Indonesia. We will continue to give our best to the nation. We will always be eager to develop the country. Innovation for solutions.
This is the first step to bring smile. BRI, Pegadaian, and PNM strides on, bringing changes as one entity, bringing you closer to us, and answering all your needs to bring smile. This is our answer that brings you to grow and brings meaning to everyone's smile.
Selamat datang di sebuah pengalaman perjalanan baru Indonesia bersama tim Journey. Terbang bersama kami untuk melihat pariwisata Indonesia, sirkuit internasional, bentang alam, ragam atraksi budaya, produk lokal asli Indonesia, warisan budaya, keamanan dan kenyamanan. Tim Journey membawa keramahan Indonesia ke dunia.
Tumbuh kembang kami juga memberikan makna dan arti. Betapa pentingnya peran kami yang tak pernah lepas dalam hadirkan konektivitas. Karena kami yakin dan mampu untuk terus lewati batas dan merajut konektivitas. Indonesia.
Mereka yang tak pernah padam untuk ikut serta dalam membangkitkan perekonomian Indonesia. Mungkin mereka yang tak pernah lepas untuk selalu berperan dalam membantu dan membangun negeri demi Indonesia yang lebih maju dan demi memberikan pelayanan yang terbaik. Karena mereka adalah Pos Indonesia.
Siapapun bisa mengajar, tapi tak semuanya bisa menjadi guru. Semua orang bisa menolong sesama, tapi tak semuanya bisa mengemban amanah. Siapa saja bisa menjadi abdi negara, tapi belum tentu mengabdi dengan dedikasi. Dengan jaminan pasti dan layanan terbaik, Taspen hadir untuk Anda, pahlawan bangsa.